Uh, Thank you, Owen. Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to the TSI information event this afternoon. It's great to see so many registered for the event, and we'd like to welcome our colleagues from DG Reform as well. Just to introduce myself, I'm Fiona O'Callaghan. I work in the Public Transformation Unit within Deeper, and along with my colleague Ailish Henry, we act as the National Coordinating Authority for TSI. We also have our colleague Owen Tunstead, who's on our technology today, so thanks for that, Owen. We hope you find it beneficial today. I know we're due to run till 4 o'clock. It may finish a little bit earlier than that. We will have time for questions and answers later on. And so just in relation to that, I suppose, a bit of housekeeping. If people could stay on mute during the WebEx, we are going to record it and we will send you out the links following the session on that. If you have a question, you'll see down on the bottom right-hand corner 3 little dots on your WebEx screen. And if you click on that, you will see a Q&A and you can enter your questions into that. And alternatively, if you can't find that, if you want to enter them into the chat function, we'll be happy to pick up on them later on. As I said, the session will be recorded on that, and we will send you out the links and we'll update them on our gov.ie page as well. So now to the agenda for the session. I'm going to just run very quickly through it. Obviously, my introduction, which I'm only allowed for 5 minutes and I'm running over already. We'll have a welcome address from Marianne Cassidy. Marianne is the Assistant Secretary and Head of Public Service Transformation Unit in Deeper. We then have a welcome message from the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath. Unfortunately, couldn't be with us, but we'll have a video from him. We're also going to be joined today by Natalie Berger from the Director from DG Reform, and Natalie will give us some introductory remarks. Then we have Alistair, who is our Policy Officer and our Country Liaison for TSI, and they've been very helpful to us over the last number of years. And Alistair is going to give a practical guide to TSI. Then we're lucky to have our colleague Breda Rafter from the Department of Health with us to give us a practical example of where she has received support from the TSI. Then we're into the flagship project presentations from our policy officers in DG Reform. We have 12 flagships projects this year, and I know a lot of you will be very interested in them. And then we'll follow by our questions and answer session. And again, Alistair will either field the questions or answer the questions as they come through. And then we'll just do a wrap up at the end, just with some kind of key dates. So I suppose without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Marianne Cassidy. You're welcome, Marianne.
Thanks, Fiona. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Marianne Cassidy. As Fiona mentioned, I'm heading up the Public Service Transformation Unit of Deeper. That unit has responsibility for both the transformation policy and delivery of civil service renewal and our public service. And it also includes the TSI coordinating authority, Fiona and Ailish, that you've just been introduced to. Also, since our recent reorganization, I also have responsibility for communication for Deeper and for 17 vote and expenditure. So I'm really delighted to have been invited to open today's TSI transformation session webinar and to encourage application for funding from all of you, from public service bodies under the EU technical support instrument for 2023. I would like to welcome Natalie. I think Natalie has joined. She had a little bit of trouble joining earlier. Natalie Berger, Director for Member State Reforms, and also other DG Reform representatives who are here to support us in our application for funding under TSI for 2023. So for those of you that are not familiar with TSI, it's a EU program that provides tailor-made technical expertise to EU member states to design and implement reforms. And we know we're all in the business of reform across the public sectors. The support is demand-driven, and it doesn't require co-financing from member states. It's a unique service to help us tackle reform challenge. And today it's very much targeted at those public bodies amongst yourself with potential reform project, and it will aim to provide you with some further information on the EU top priorities, the application process for TSI 2023 funding. And Alistair, you're going to run us through that and to put forward any question. So as I mentioned, you will hear from Nathalie Berger, another DG Reform representative, who will give us a brief overview of this year's 12 flagship projects, which include digital and climate green topics. In addition, we're going to hear from Breda Rafter, Principal Officer in the Strategic Workforce Planning Unit in the Department of Health. And Breda will provide us with her insight and experience of how TSIs have provided support for the department's projects. It's always good to learn from others. There'll be time for question and answer on the TSI, which can be entered, as Fiona mentioned, through the chat function. And Alistair, I think you're moderating that for us. In terms of the TSI funding in Ireland, just to give you a little bit of context, we've been very successful in receiving funding for national priority projects under the TSI. Some of you might, it used to be called the Structural Reform Support Programme. And in total, since 2018, the DG Reform has supported 44 Irish projects, totaling almost 16 million. And last year, 37 applications were received for the 2022 funding round. And an internal deeper assessment committee assessed and ranked the application, and all applications were sent to the Commission for determination of the final portfolio of project for Ireland. So that gives you an idea how the process works. Ireland was notified by the Commission selection at the end of December 2021, and about 3.8 million was allocated to 8 different Irish projects for 2022. The project covered a very wide range of area of reform, from gender mainstreaming in public policy and budget processes, support to the renovation wave and development of resilient, innovative and user-centric digital government services. And we had also a very wide range of departments successful in their application: the Department of Children, the OGP, the OPW, the Department of Environment, Climate and Communication, Limerick City and County Council, the Pension Authority and the Central Bank of Ireland. In 2022, in light of the Ukrainian crisis and the new difficulties, the European Commission launched a special call under TSI to help member states welcoming Ukrainian refugees following the Russian invasion of the country and the phasing out of our reliance on fossil fuel from Russia. And during that call, the Department of Environment, Climate and Communication were successful in receiving TSI support under the Repower EU project. So for 2023, I'm particularly pleased to welcome the 12 flagship projects announced by the Commission this year. These flagship projects represent the priority for the European Union, and it's also very much aligned with our own reform agenda in Ireland in terms of civil service renewal and our public service. It's about the public finance and procurement, climate change, public administration and digitalization. But I think the colleagues from DG Reform are going to tell us all about those priorities in a minute. Just to explain that this year a particular emphasis has been put on multi-country projects. And the Commission is particularly interested in exploring projects that address cross-border mutual reform priorities, of which there are many. As mentioned earlier, we're facing many challenges. 2022 has been quite a difficult year after two other difficult years, being the economic recovery following the COVID-19 crisis, the devastating impact of the war in Ukraine, and the need to meet our objective under the National Action Plan. And it's great to see the support that the TSI offers to us to address those challenges. So just to wrap up, the TSI National Coordination Authority team is within my division in Deeper. It is led by Fiona and Ailish Anry. And Fiona, I invite you to contact Fiona and Ailish. They're very happy to help you in terms of if you wish to submit an application for support under TSI, to offer advice on the process, to put you in touch with the relevant personnel in the EU. Fiona and Ailish are here to help, and you can make yourself known. A reminder that all completed applications need to be submitted by the National Coordinating Authority by close of business on the 11th of October 2022. So 11th of October 2022 is a date to put on the calendar. That's the deadline. Please note that it's good if you're thinking of a project, engage early. And the DG reform really encouraged the early engagement, and especially if you want to avail of the multi-country request or support. And finally, I'd like to thank the DG reform team for providing the support today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I trust it will provide you with valuable information if you want or need, if you have a project in mind for the 2023 funding round. And as Fiona mentioned, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath, couldn't be with us today, but he's given us a brief video message, and we'll play that message for you now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Owen. I think, are we back?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that, Marianne. Thank you for the introduction and our piece from the Minister. I believe Natalie is on the call now. So Natalie, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time out today for us, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Dear Assistant Secretary, dear representatives from across the Irish government departments and authorities, Trono Mama, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to address you today at this information session on the technical support instrument. Since 2017, the European Commission and DG Reform has provided the technical expertise to help design over 1,000 reform projects in the 27 member states. And most importantly for us today, we have enjoyed a most fruitful collaboration with Ireland since 2018 on 44 projects, out of which 9 were selected for funding under the general round of the TSI for 2022. And several of our joint initiatives have already come to a successful conclusion. We have cooperated, for instance, in identifying and prioritizing a reform on an authorization and supervision manual for Central Securities Depository. We achieved this by working closely with the colleagues in the Department of Finance, the Central Bank of Ireland, and an expert team that was mobilized to formulate policy reform recommendations. Another example of successful technical support is the reform linked to the establishment of a modern regulatory authority for all gambling activities licensed in Ireland, currently being taken forward in the Gambling Regulation Bill under consideration by the Irish TAS. I'm very pleased that reforms on both these fronts are moving forward and that the technical support we have been provided has been put to effective use. Stories like these are a great success story for us in DG Reform. But even more for you in the member states, you in Ireland, as without your commitment and your imagination to design high quality requests and reforms, our work would not be possible. Over the years, we have learned and improved, deepened and widened our offer. This year, the technical support instrument continues to support reforms with an emphasis on the green and digital transition, health, economic, social, and institutional resilience, and smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth, not even mentioning energy, as in the context of the tragic events in Ukraine, we have issued a dedicated call and provided assistance to the member states on energy, migration, and the implementation of the financial sanctions packages. Today, we look forward to receiving the individual requests from the member states. But since last year, we have also been designing the so-called flagship projects, which are an additional offer to simplify your work and which are no obligation. We have designed these flagships on the basis of the needs identified from the member state. You will hear more about the flagship projects in a presentation later on from our DG Reform teams. But in a nutshell, the idea with the flagship projects is to create projects which are relevant for many, possibly even all the member states, and which address the European priorities on the basis of the needs expressed by the member states. The flagship projects are an efficient way for the member states to receive technical support, as there is no need for developing all the requests on their own, but always the possibility to add and design on the basis of the need of the member state. You know that all our work is demand-driven. We provide technical support and expertise on the basis of member states' needs and requests. And even when a member state joins a flagship initiative, there may be some elements that we can build in common with other member states, but the bulk the work, the request of every member state, Ireland's request, is going to be subject to bespoke, tailor-made, individual assistance. Flagships in practice propose some solutions to common challenges that we have identified on the basis of our experience, but as I said it, they are adapted to the needs of every single participating member state. And beside the flagship projects, which have in many cases become multi-country projects, we welcome member states' individual requests to multi-country projects as well, where relevant. We strongly believe that this way of fostering mutual cooperation beyond borders is a unique selling point for what we do, as every member state has strengths which others can benefit from. In addition to these projects, we are supporting the member states in addressing the huge and the varied challenges presented by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, like I mentioned previously before. In this regard, in terms of energy security, we are proud to be already helping Ireland to move away from the Russian fossil fuels through an additional dedicated call, specifically in response to the shameful Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Irish project here will particularly help to accelerate and streamline renewable energy permitting and speed up the rollout of renewable hydrogen and other suitable forms of fossil-free hydrogen. Likewise, we stand ready to provide technical support to the Irish public authorities to address the needs of people fleeing Ukraine and in particular boost their successful integration and their labor market inclusion, as well as the access of the children refugees to education. Unfortunately, the emerging geopolitical challenges are, of course, not the only policy problems that confront us today, and indeed maybe not even the most difficult and impactful we are facing long term. The climate emergency is still there, which is why we need to rebuild our economies in a green and sustainable way. In addition, we all know that the future is increasingly digital, and to remain successful in this digital future, we have to focus our efforts in this area. In this regard, the national recovery and resilience plans are pivotal. In our proposal for the Irish Recovery and Resilience Plan, the Commission services welcomed the strong green dimension included in the Irish plan. The Commission's assessment found that Ireland's plan devoted 42% total allocation to measures that support the climate objectives. This outperforms the ERF green spending target of 37%. And this includes measures supporting energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, biodiversity, and the ecosystems. The reforms and the investments under the Irish Recovery and Resilience Plan will contribute to the government's major policy objective of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. This objective is now, of course, placed on equal and legal footing as part of the implementation in the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Act 2021, in line with the European Green Deal. In addition, the Recovery and Resilience Plan focuses 32% of its total allocation on measures that support the digital transition, including measures to enhance the connectivity, support the digitalization of the public administration and of enterprises, and contribute to the upskilling in the educational system. The technical support instrument and DG Reform continues to be available to provide technical support for the design and the implementation of the reforms that you have included in your National Recovery and Resilience Plan in a complementary manner to the funding provided through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Naturally, we will need to be mindful to avoid overlaps and double funding. But your own reform plan will provide an important strategic context for prioritizing the digital support available through complementary commissioned instruments such as the Technical Support Instrument. Indeed, we are also playing a key role in assisting Ireland with the implementation of your Recovery and Resilience Plan. And we are delighted and honored to be working with the ARP implementing body within the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform to establish a monitoring, reporting, audit and control system for the ARP through an ambitious project. And I would like to thank you very much for your trust, which greatly honors us. In this context, the Recovery and Resilience Facility is, of course, at the heart of the Repower EU Action Plan to allow us to shift away from our collective European Union dependence on Russian fossil fuels by supporting coordinated planning and financing cross-border and national infrastructure, as well as energy projects and reforms. The Technical Support Instrument can therefore be a vital tool, providing the expertise needed to integrate a dedicated Repower EU chapter in Ireland's Recovery and Resilience Plan and subsequently implemented. In view of the upcoming TSI 2023 call, I can only strongly recommend that you share your requests and even only ideas early on to us, so we can provide feedback and assistance in developing the request. As experience has shown that an early involvement, which can be really informal on our side, can benefit the quality of requests and increase the chances to be selected for support, as our selection process is more and more competitive due to the increasing and more success of our technical support instrument. It is worth recalling that the internal deadline to send requests to the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform is the 11th of October this year, with our DG Reform deadline itself falling on the 31st of October. I would also like to encourage you not only to benefit from our technical support, but also to provide it, to contribute where possible. And in fact, Ireland has already been active in providing support in domains such as innovation, community policing, cybercrime, the reform of the revenue administration, etc. And we are supporting the exchange of good practices among member states with our TAIEX instrument, which allows us to cover the costs of visits of experts from the European public administrations in support of their peers in other member states. Ireland has much to share, and there is much to benefit to the other states, other member states, from Ireland's experience. There is absolutely no doubt that many member states have a lot to learn from you, and particularly on the functioning of the public administration. We witness this both through the projects we have supported in Ireland over the past years, as well as in the cooperation that we have had with the Irish authorities in providing technical support to other member states. We see that there is a constant interest from other member states' authorities to cooperate with the authorities in Ireland in a targeted manner as peers and experts through the TAIEX instrument, but also in the longer term as reform partners in implementation of an entire project. This is something that we would be really pleased to explore further and continue continue to benefit from the great support of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform for facilitating contacts with the community of Irish experts. With that, let me thank you very much for your interest in our work and the excellent cooperation among your authorities with our DG reform teams in the past and certainly in the future as well. Together with my colleagues, we have Alistair, who is our key partner in the cooperation with Ireland. We are available to support you throughout the process of preparing the specific requests. And today we are here to answer all the burning questions you may have but never dare to ask. Thank you very much.
Nathalie, thank you very much for that. It's great to see the support that's been offered to us over the last number of years, and we look forward. You will see by the number of participants today, we have lots of people with lots of burning questions, I would imagine, on that. So many thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to Alistair now. So to introduce Alistair, as Nathalie mentioned, he's not only the policy officer, he's also our country liaison officer, and he has provided himself and his colleagues lots of support to us over the last number of years. So I know Alistair is going to take us through kind of practical guide to TSI. So Alistair, over to you.
Thanks very much, Fiona, and thanks very much for the very generous and kind introduction as well. So in this short presentation, I really want to focus on a few practical, down-to-earth questions. I mean, what the TSI is, just to sort of recap that, what the process is, what the dates are to put in the diary, what kind of support we will actually can provide, what we mean really by technical support, what kind of fields we can provide it in, and I'll touch briefly just to conclude on an example of that by talking about how we can help with NRRP implementation in Ireland. Sorry, I meant to pull up the slides, of course, but so hang on. So if I, sorry, here we are. So you can see that now. So I mean, in terms of what the TSI is, I mean, I mean, essentially, it's an EU program that provides 864 million euros of support in the form of technical support, by which we really mean policy expertise and advisory services. And we'll look at the various ways in which that can be delivered. And in terms of its kind of characteristics, I mean, the TSI is many things, but I mean, first of all, it's a tailor-made instrument. The ideas for what we take forward in the different projects are really conceived and developed by you, and will assist you in designing those. And in that sense too, it's demand driven. It comes primarily from the member states, and that also in the context of the flagships, as Nathalie was mentioning, there's a lot of customization that can be foreseen in that context. In terms of the material scope of what we can provide for reform, it's really in a huge range of area. I mean, you could almost say any area at any phase of the reform. We're talking about a vast range of policy areas, really. And then if we look at the beneficiaries of the support and the advice and policy expertise that we can help you to procure and develop, we are really talking about beneficiaries at any level of government. So it could be local government, regional government, national government. In terms of the beneficiaries, you can have multiple beneficiaries. You could be talking about several government departments. If we look at the legal form of the beneficiaries, they can be public law bodies. In some cases, they can even be private law bodies, subject to certain tests. So we're talking about really a wide range of kind of beneficiaries, a wide range of support in a wide range of areas, and always developed by yourselves in a demand-driven way. So if we talk now, I mean, going beyond what the TSI is in general terms, if we look now at what the process is for application. I mean, in broad terms, we have three phases. There's the submission of requests for technical support by member states. So the important date again is the 11th of October in Ireland to get to the colleagues in DEEPR. But our deadline ultimately to receive those requests again from DEEPR is the 31st of October, Halloween. And then there's a process of selecting those requests. So as was mentioned before, we had 37 requests from Ireland last year, which was a very large number of requests. In fact, the third largest number, I think, of any member state. So there's a lot of interest from Ireland, really. So we'll select those requests on the basis of the criteria of how deep, wide, and how mature the kind of measures that are being set out in the request are. And then following that, in the new year, we will move towards the provision of technical support. I'll talk more in detail about the kind of dates on a calendar. But in terms of the kind of expertise we provide, I mean, primarily we provide the European Commission's in-house expertise, and we have a great deal of in-house expertise in a range of policy fields that we're lucky enough to be able to mobilize. And I know that you will have interlocutors that you're working with in a range of policy fields, and we can kind of continue and forward that cooperation. But we go beyond our own expertise by also involving international organizations. That could be the OECD, it could be the Council of Europe, it could be the World Bank, it could be a range of different international organizations. We mobilize member states, our experts. We were hearing before from Natalie about how Ireland is a very active and valuable participant in that process, and how other member states really look to Ireland for Ireland's expertise, but you can also engage in exchange there, which I think is a very valuable part of sort of mutual learning that we can benefit from. And then there's private sector experts, advisory firms, which bring a high level and high quality of expertise as well. So if we, so I mean here, so this year is the kind of calendar. So we've already had, we kick off proceedings, then we get ourselves started with the TSI annual conference every year in May. And I thank many of you for having been present there earlier in the year. And then we begin these kind of TSI rollout visits, in this case in a virtual format at the present time. Then we will move on to input by coordinating authorities for multi-country projects by the 5th of September. Now, in the case of Ireland, I think my colleagues have asked for you to manifest interest in the TSI for this round by the 2nd of September, but I know that there will be a follow-up on that. So that's part of that. Then the IT portal for making the request itself will open on the 3rd of October, then coming back again to the 11th of October as your date to get draft requests into the DEEPR colleagues. And of course, we come back to Halloween again as the date for the submission of requests on the 31st of October. So in terms of what you'll be asked to provide in a request, we will ask you to kind of signal a few things. If there's a multi-country dimension to the request, what's very important there is that if you approach us in DG Reform early, and the colleagues in DEEPR can direct you to the right counterparts in that context. We can help to already identify multi-country dimensions and to get you to speak to counterparts in other member states. And that's something that we can coordinate at a DG Reform level. And what we'd also primarily be looking for is a description of the problem and the need, the policy problem, the policy challenge that needs to be addressed, and why essentially you're asking for technical support. and we would look for the breadth of the problem in terms of the different policy areas that it touches upon, its urgency, and then how impactful it is. It's the depth of the problem. And for those things, you can look for some substantiation also in European semester documents, country-specific recommendations, in addition to other national level reports and your own assessment, of course, of policy problems. And then we would look for an indicative description of the kind of support that you're looking for. Are you looking for capacity building? Are you looking for certain kinds of feasibility studies? Are you looking for technical specifications for IT systems? We would look for an idea of the kind of support measures that you would like to see on the ground, and attached with that, if possible, an estimated cost of what each of those support measures, each of those deliverables will mean, and then indicators to indicate whether we've achieved the outcomes and output and outcomes that we're looking for. And then finally, we'd ask for your consent for communication activities for during the project. So in terms of the different templates you can use, I mean, there's essentially, there are 12 flagship templates, and we'll talk later about exactly what those flagships are, but they're essentially, when it comes down to the templates, you'd find them pre-populated with a range of measures that you can customize and in fact add to. But that's in that sense, when you look at the templates, you see how flagships can really help you on your end to quickly put together a request with ideas that are already sort of supplied as inspiration, that follow EU priorities fundamentally. And then we have we also have the if you like, vanilla standard request templates as well, which would not be so pre-populated. So those requests are ultimately going to be submitted through the Commission's IT platform, and there are some links in the materials which I think will be shared later. And you need to have an EU login account. It's a very important practical element in order to do that. Our colleagues in DEEPA have asked that beneficiaries submit Word documents to them, again by this 11th of October deadline, and that in doing so, that this is something we'll all remember from school and university, that we respect the word count in those templates, and that we avoid the use of images and graphs as well, just in terms of compatibility questions. So although there can be links to that where necessary and useful. So I mean, we have the normal vanilla request templates, and then we're going to have the 12 flagship elements. In terms of the areas covered, I mean, we can see a very wide range of areas here. We can see green transition, digital transition, health and long-term care. Oh dear, no, sorry. Oh, I don't. Okay. Oh, sorry. Are we back now? But so we can you can talk about those. Sorry. Just here we are. And then skills, education and training, governance and public administration, competitiveness, the financial sector and access to finance, revenue administration and public financial management, and labour market and social protection. So a very wide range of areas. I mean, just to kind of give you an indicative idea of what the general picture was from the last year's round, from 2022, I mean, 57% of the projects contributed towards the implementation of the NRRPs in the various member states. And then 52% contributed to digital transition, 36% to green transition, I mean, which are also targets in the NRRPs themselves. So there's a kind of alignment on that from that point of view. If we look at the general breakdown, I mean, you'll see the 6 different areas that we have there for different requests. So I mean, yeah, I mean, so you can sort of see that there's it's a more or less, I mean, the cake is more or less evenly sliced there, but you can sort of see that some areas are perhaps larger than others. So I mean, and another important thing that we've done since last year's call is a dedicated call in response to the emerging policy needs from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And of course, the 2 principal policy problems that we're all very much aware of that have arisen from that crisis are the question of energy security and dependency on Russian fossil fuels, and then at the same time the challenges of welcoming third country nationals fleeing Ukraine in this context. So I mean, that dedicated call in which Ireland participated on the energy dependency aspect had a budget of 9 million, and 32 requests were submitted from the 20 member states. And this is something that, I mean, this isn't, I think this, I mean, demonstrates the nimbleness really of the TSI, because it's able to respond to emerging needs from member states. In terms of the 2023 priorities, I mean, there are essentially 3 planks to that. I mean, the first is to help contribute still to these NRRP milestones and targets, and then we'll also be able to help you with these flagship projects and with multi-country projects. So I'll talk later with my colleagues about the flagship contract projects and the multi-country projects, because those 2 ideas are somewhat linked, although not necessarily. But for just now, I'll just talk about the recovery and resilience plans. So in terms of the support that the TSI can lend for the fulfillment of milestones and targets under the NRRPs, I mean, there are 2 types of support. There's general support, so horizontally applicable, for the smooth implementation and administration of the NRRPs. So that in the case of Ireland, that's something that we're taking forward already with a project on monitoring, control, audit, capacity building for other kind of NRRP requirements. But then there's thematic support. So if you look through the annex to the NRRP, you'll see the different milestones and targets. We can help you. We can help your capacity and help you, give you secure the policy advice to satisfy those milestones and targets. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of the general support. I perhaps won't spend too much time talking about that, because as you can see, Ireland is already among one of the 18 member states that's benefiting from that support already. In terms of how we can contribute to the implementation of the recovery and resilience plans, I mean, we already have 300 TSI projects that are linked from that. As I said before, more than half, 57% of last year's requests were linked to that as well. I mean, I could perhaps give you an example of general support for NRP, which is to do with a communication strategy on the NRRP in Slovakia. Similarly in Portugal, and the Portuguese project perhaps aligns a little bit more with the Irish project at the moment. There's a monitoring element, evaluation, audit. So that's something we're taking forward there. But we can also help with those thematic, those specific milestones and targets in the substantive policy fields of, well, for instance, digital transition, green transition, competitiveness, long-term healthcare, skills, governance and administration, all of the things that you'll find in the Irish NRRP. So, I mean, just give you some examples, this could be the spending reviews that we've been helping with in Belgium, rail sector restructuring in Greece, public administration in Italy with digitizing and improving the exchange of information, healthcare in Romania, in Lithuania. So we are really have proven to be a key part of implementing NRRPs, and it's something I very much encourage you to sort of to look at when you're thinking about what kind of request, what kind of support to request under the TSI this year in the Irish context. So and keeping in mind the indicative deadlines that are coming up in 2023 and 2024 in particular, and in fact really in the year 2024 if we look at the timeline for rolling out support in the course of next year. So I hope that this sort of practical guide has given you an idea of what the TSI is, what the kind of dates are to put in the diary. So the 11th of October is the important one to get those requests to DEEPR, and then Halloween for them to then come on to us. You'll be expecting the rollout of support in the first and second quarter of 2023. And then I've sort of given you an idea of what kind of thematic areas are in that specific example of the NRRPs. And we'll look at the flagships and multi-country projects just now. Okay.
That's great, Alistair. Thanks very much for that. Very comprehensive on that. I think we're reminding people enough about the 11th of October that it'll never go out of their brains. Anyway, as part of today, and thanks to everybody so far, we thought it'd be nice to hear from a national recipient of TSI support. And in this case, I'd like to introduce you to Breda Rafter. You heard Breda mentioned earlier on, who's the Principal Officer in Strategic Workforce Planning Unit in the Department of Health. But not only has Breda been successful once in an application for TSI or RSP support as it was in the past, but she's been successful twice. So she obviously has the magic somewhere on this. So Breda has very kindly agreed to talk to us today, just very briefly, in terms of the recently supported project, which is Health and Social Care Workforce Planning in Ireland. And I will hand over to Breda at this stage. Thanks, Breda, and thanks, Alistair.
Very much, Fiona, and thank you to everybody and to the European Commission for this opportunity to present our project. So I just put up my slides now. To have this opportunity. So I'm head of the Workforce Planning Unit for the health sector in the Department of Health. So the European Commission then is providing the support, the economic and technical support to the department for the health and social care workforce planning strategy, action plan and planning projection model. So the Department of Health initiated this project to address the long-term workforce planning needs of the health sector. The support kicked off in Q1 of 2022, so delayed a little bit by the COVID, and it's due to conclude in Q3 2023. So an external contractor, ARC Limited, is partnering with Indicom Consulting to provide the support across 7 core deliverables, all aligned to the Department of Health's policy agenda of building health and social care workforce planning capacity across the wider health and social care sector. So a key outcome of the project is that the Department of Health will have the necessary tools, processes and technical capacity to produce rolling health and social care workforce planning actions and implement targeted policy measures for health and social care workforce reform. Ireland faces significant, the background to the project is that Ireland faces significant challenges in the recruitment and retention of doctors and nurses and other health and social care professionals. We have a relatively high number of nurses, 12.9 versus the EU average of 8.8 per thousand of population. But this is impacted by the large share of part-time work and nurses working in non-caring roles. While we have the highest number of medical graduates per capita in the EU, we have the lower than average practicing doctors is lower than the EU average of 3.47 versus the EU average of 3.6 per 1,000 of population. So this really isn't sustainable. The Irish health system is heavily reliant on immigration for doctors, nurses and other health and social care professionals to provide our health services. So there's an urgent need for an integrated, comprehensive and sustainable approach to health and social care workforce planning to support the successful implementation of this large care reform programme. So we're operating in a very complex environment. We have multiple stakeholders. There are a number of government departments, the Department of Health and the Department of Further and Higher Education. There's a number of agencies, the HSE, TUSLA, the higher education agencies, the medical schools, the medical training bodies and the postgraduate training bodies. Also regulators with the Medical Council, CORU and the Nursing and Midwifery, NMBI. So, and then we have all the professions, doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, health and care assistants, and then 26 allied health professions, which would include social workers, radiographers, occupational therapists and physiotherapists. So there are huge data collection requirements across the sector and a lot of gaps within those data requirements. This will be across the HSE, the education sector, the professional regulators, and then the private sector. The private sector and the community sector is a significant challenge. And I suppose we're trying to develop this work against a background of other initiatives and other work that's underway. So we have the ESRI Hippocrates model, which is a demand model to project future healthcare need. And then the Department of Health also did a capacity review in 2018. And there have been other workforce planning initiatives down through the year, which we need to build upon into the future. So the first outcome of the project is that, as I said earlier, is that we'll have the necessary tools, process and technical capacity to produce rolling health and social care workforce planning actions and implement targeted policy measures for health and social care reform. So the first two deliverables are associated with that outcome, and that's the Inception report, the strategy and action plan, a workforce planning projection model, and then the workforce projections and gap analysis, and then a report setting out the reforms into the future. We also then, the second outcome is raising awareness across EU and among stakeholders, and this would be an outcome out of a lot of the EU projects. So we'll have a report on the communication activities and an international workshop, and then a final report that will bring all this together. So in terms of our first deliverable, the Project Inception report, this is a really important deliverable because it provides the common understanding among the parties, the European Commission, the Department of Health and the contractor on the implementation approach to the project. But it also sets out the actions that we will work on to deliver the key deliverables. So the ultimate objective of this project is the development of scenario-based projections for health and social care workforce supply and demand. And this will inform the strategy, the action plan, and the set of recommendations for ongoing health and social care workforce planning reforms. So we're currently focused then at the moment on deliverable 2, which is the strategy and action plan. And this has been informed by an extensive engagement with a diverse range of stakeholders. Extensive work has been completed in relation to the inputs to the strategy and action plan. We've done with Indicon, Indicon have done a lot of the work, and they've done an assessment of the maturity of the current health and social care workforce planning processes. We're looking at the data source mapping, research review into to inform the technical specifications for the workforce planning projection model. We're drafting recommendations for the strategy and action plan. And then we've done extensive stakeholder engagement across the multiple stakeholders in the sector. This policy dialogue then was further enhanced by an international workshop that we held on the 7th of June. And that was basically to learn from best practice across other jurisdictions, including Scotland, the Netherlands, Sweden, New Zealand, Spain, and Italy. So in terms of the key learnings from our project and from the other projects I have been involved in, it's really important to clearly identify, and this is what has been reiterated or spoken about by the other contributors, Natalie and Alistair, that it's really important to identify the problem you're trying to solve and the type of support you require, and then that you clearly identify the key deliverables, the policy outcomes you want to achieve, and the impact. And I suppose a lot of work needs to go into this area, and that really helps at a later stage if you're successful in developing the request for support and developing for the tender process. It's also really important to focus on government priorities and EU perspectives and the relevancy for the EU agenda that will really support your application. As Natalie mentioned earlier, it's really important to engage at an early stage with DG Reform on this request for support. DG Reform will provide valuable assistance in developing the request for support, but also with defining the problem you're trying to address and describing the key deliverables and outcomes for the project. It's also really important to ensure senior management support across the department and across key stakeholders to ensure that relevant agencies and officials are available to provide input and support to the project. It is a big resource requirement for departments, and you have to be, able to support the work throughout the project. It's important then to have regular communication and meetings with the service providers and with the steering committee, Department of Health, in our case, the Department of Health, DG Reform, and the provider, Indicon. And this is really critical to ensure that the project remains on track and that you're meeting the objectives. In terms of concluding comments, I'd like just to fully support what the Minister and Natalie have said, that the technical support instrument, it's a wonderful opportunity for government departments and agencies to address government priorities and departmental objectives. And the fact there's no co-funding requirement is really significant. As was mentioned earlier, I've actually been involved in 3 projects to date, 2 under the predecessor, the Structural Reform Support Programme, and 1 under the Technical Support Instrument. So my first 2 projects were around financial management and financial reporting reforms. And this work led to a government decision to move to accrual accounting for financial reporting for government departments. And also we developed a roadmap for the phasing of implementation of the accounting financial reforms. And this work is currently underway in DPER. But it was really significant for that work that we got a government decision. And I firmly believe that that wouldn't have happened without the help of the Structural Reform Support Programme. And we could point to best practice in other, European countries, the UK, Italy, Portugal. They were all doing the same thing and, addressing and involved in the same reform programs. So they really helped us develop our roadmap for implementation of reforms. And also, actually, what I was saying earlier about that it's important to align with the EU agenda. Another aspect to that was there was Eurostat had an EU project to harmonise European financial reporting accounting standards. So they wanted member states to move to accrual accounting. So this work really supported not only did it support the DPER reform agenda of financial reporting reforms, but it was also supporting the EU reform agenda, which was really important for the project. So the value of I firmly believe the value of these programs, such as the SRSP and the Technical Support Instrument, is the level of knowledge and international expertise that they bring to a project. The key learnings that you get from best practice from across other EU member states and OECD countries. like, I mean, all these problems we're dealing with, I mean, it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. Most countries are grappling with the same issues, and you can learn so much from other countries. Either they're starting to tackle the problem, or they may be halfway through that journey, or they may be a best practice exemplar. So you will find different levels of progress across countries, and it's really important to tap into that. Similar, I suppose, you know, in the current context, in the project I'm dealing with in the moment in the health sector, I mean, COVID has shown like there has been significant challenges across EU member states regarding the shortage of health workforce, health professionals, and I suppose in developing resilience of healthcare workers. So we have so much to learn from other member states, and we can contribute to that learning journey as well. So I'm really, you know, in conclusion, I'm really delighted to have been involved and have worked with DG Reform across all 3 projects, and really happy with the deliverables achieved and the success of those projects. And it's not the case that DG Reform leave you off on your own to deliver this project. They stay with you throughout the project, which is really valuable support. So I'd highly recommend to other government departments and agencies to engage in this process and to make applications under the technical support instrument. And I'm available if anyone wants to contact me after this, or I'm always available. I mean, my contact details can be got from Fiona and the team in DPER, but I'm happy to talk to anyone that is preparing an application or wants to talk informally offline. So thank you for your time.
Breda, thanks very much for that. I'm sorry I got it wrong to know that there was 3 projects and not just 2. And thanks for offering your contact details as well. So as I say, I know Marianne mentioned it earlier on, so Ireland TSI funding at per.gov.ie, and we will put that along later, so if you need to get in touch with us. So now we're on to the 12 flagships for 2023, and our colleagues and our representatives from DG Reform are here to talk us through, I think, briefly on this. As we say, we also have a gov.ie page that gives links to all the updates on TSI and the application forms, and that's just go into gov.ie, and in the search just put in TSI and it'll bring you to our page as well. So I don't know who's going to introduce our representatives from DG Reform. Alistair, do I hand back over to you for the flagships? He's trying to find the unmute button.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh dear. Oh, good. Am I unmuted now? Yes, I am. Okay, great. I hope I am. Otherwise, it will be okay. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up, so that's great. So I'm going to introduce the flagship concept. So as I say, I think the flagship concept, and then I'll come on to multi-country after having passed the floor over to my colleagues from other policy units. I mean, the fundamental objective we're trying to achieve through flagships is alignment with EU policies, and that's what the multi-country idea and also the pursuit of NRRP milestones and targets also pursues. But then I think another thing about flagships is really that they just make your lives easier. So I mean, in terms of the genesis of the flagships for this year, I mean, they really come out of discussions that we've had with member state authorities. So, I mean, the ideas have been canvassed widely with the 27 member states through the network of coordinating authorities. And I think there's been broader involvement beyond that in tandem with our policy DGs, and they've really been developed on that basis to sort of line up what you're seeing as being problems that are emerging with what our colleagues in other DGs are seeing as being the emerging policy problems at an EU level, and sort of joining the dots between those two things. And I mean, just to kind of use this clothing analogy, if you like, I mean, we talk very often about the TSI being tailor-made. I mean, flagships are kind of like an off-the-hook solution, if you want, but as we've been saying, and as we know ourselves from our wardrobes, I mean, an off-the-hook solution doesn't mean that you can't customize to a certain extent, and you can't accessorize, and there are choices to be made in terms of the different work packages that are offered under those different flagships, and there's a lot of adaptability, and yeah, there's a lot of transparency and openness to absorb new ideas within the framework of those flagships. But I mean, the fundamental work packages are provided there. So, and what I mean by work packages are the kind of deliverables, the support you would want to find on the ground to address the main policy problems that have been identified as part of that process. But the use of the whole flagship template idea is entirely voluntary, and really the impetus for it will come from yourselves in the government departments submitting through Deeper, and so it's an entirely voluntary uptake. But I think it's sort of worth saying, just for context, that I mean, half of those requests selected in last year's round were flagship requests, and I mean, the simple reason for that is that they align with priorities and with emerging policy challenges that are clearly identified, and of course what is sought by the project in terms of the concrete measures, what you want the policy experts to actually achieve, what you want them to devise, is already to an extent predefined, and it's much more mature and easy to turn into something, and for that reason it's a good candidate for selection as a technical support project. In terms of the sort of thematic themes that we can talk about, the thematic areas that we can identify, I mean, there are 6 pillars that are identified this year for different flagships, and we'll go through each of the flagships in turn, but these are the sort of the 6 areas. So we have, digital and green transition, the so-called twin transition, of course, there front and center, but we also have a next generation, smart, sustainable, inclusive growth, health and economic, social and institutional resilience, social and territorial cohesion. But I'll go through each of we're going to go now through each of the individual flagships to kind of give you an idea of what's on offer. So I'm now putting on another hat, and I'm going to speak to you as a policy officer from our unit B3, which is the unit for sustainable growth and for sustainable growth and business environment. So I'll speak to you now about 3 flagships. So the first of those is to do with climate adaptation. And I mean, what we essentially seek to do through this flagship is address the fact that, I mean, climate-related disasters have unfortunately been increasing over the past decades. And we see this causing an enormous amount of economic damage. And really over the last 30 years, we can talk about something like 500 billion euros of damage throughout the EU. And this is, of course, projected to increase if global warming increases in line with projections. So what we seek to do with this flagship is to boost your capacity to set out preparedness strategies and to prevent climate-induced disasters. So this could be through things like using early warning systems that are available at an EU level. So that could be the European Flood Awareness System. It could be the forest fire information system, it could be the Copernicus emergency management system. There's a whole series of different systems that our expertise can help you to harness as part of those preparedness measures. Of course, it will mean, I think, aligning to the EU climate change strategy at different levels of government, nationally and locally, pursuing climate change adaptation measures in the RRPs, and we were speaking about the Climate Action Act 2021 earlier today. An important part of it too will be about raising public awareness and also building up skills in areas such as risk assessment and methodologies for preparedness planning. Another flagship that I'll speak to about now is really is to do with accelerating permitting for renewable energy projects. Now, we're all aware that there are targets at both an EU and a national level. I mean, firstly for greenhouse gas emissions, but then also there are energy targets as part of the Renewable Energies Directive for renewable energies, which is increasing to 40% under the new package. So, and an important part of that in achieving that in a speedy way is to put in place renewable energy projects, but we all know that there are various elements of permitting that are required to go through in order to get the project on the ground. So this project is about accelerating that and streamlining it. So we can do things like help you set up a one-stop shop that's mentioned in the Renewable Energy Directive. We can help you do things like set up renewable energy communities. We can also do things like implement the once only principle, so that documents that are submitted as part of a permitting process can be shared between national authorities. But then we can also do things like help with renewable energy zoning maps, so we can identify where there's the best potential for renewable energy exploitation. And of course, that's a big thing that Ireland has in abundance, and that's something that that might be worth making use of. In terms of, we can also help with the question of grid infrastructure as well, and help you to improve and speed up the process for connecting to the grid. In terms of, I mean, of course, a big part of any kind of planning renewable project is public engagement, and can also help on that element, particularly involving low income and vulnerable households, and ensure that communities where renewable energy projects are being established are benefiting from the energy that's produced through that. In terms of industrial ecosystems, I mean, industry is a very big part of the EU economy. It's about 20% of the EU economy, in fact, and it employs 35 million people. And what we want to do from this is help member states to boost that sector by allowing undertakings to make use of the single market to scale up. And part of what we want to do there is help you to devise industrial strategies. So that could be looking at a particular sector, it could be looking at Ireland as a whole, and looking at what the industrial strategy could be there. We also can help you with things like market surveillance systems as well. So that could be consolidating market surveillance systems, and it could be things like implementing data and risk and evidence-driven approaches into the systems that you're introducing. We can help you also to promote intellectual property rights, to stimulate innovation and the enforcement of those rights as well. And then finally, we can help with reskilling to fill gaps in the workforce and help you with digital skills and skills that will help with the green transition as well. So with that, I'll pass the floor to Raphael.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Good afternoon, everyone. Rafael Dentas from the Horizontal Policies Unit, which deals with general support linked to the RRPs, but also to the area of migration, and hence the flagship I'm presenting. Now, I have to say that with regards to the policy area of migration, Ireland is one of the few EU countries that have not benefited under the technical support instrument, but I'm sure you've seen our flagship from last year, the one called Integration of Third Country Nationals in EU member states. As for this year, we are reoffering the same migration flagship while expanding its scope. The reason is the fact that the integration of these people continues to remain a challenge in most EU countries, and the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Russian invasion of Ukraine, have highlighted once again the need to do more in this policy area. But now the novelty for this year, though, is the fact that our flagship covers member states that want to attract international talent and skills in sectors suffering from skill shortages and where gaps are hindering competitiveness and growth. And this, for example, is aligned with what Breda was saying before on Ireland's labour market needs for additional doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. Our flagship still includes 10 work packages, as Alistair said, which you can choose from. And just reiterating Natalie and Alistair, each set of deliverables can be tailored to your specific needs. For example, you could ask support to facilitate the access of these people to housing, to healthcare, to education, or the labor market. You could ask for support in the form of trainings in very specific topics around integration, or also request study visits to other EU member states to see how different countries deal with the same issues. And again, Breda put it before, there is no need to reinvent the wheel in specific cases. Most activity packages have remained the same as last year, and you can have a more detailed look on our website. And it's very good that Alistair has put the links already in the PowerPoint slides. Now, the work packages include support that ranges from providing legal expertise to designing the technical specifications for online or offline tools, to improving the coordination between stakeholders in the area of integration, and in particular improving the cooperation between the national, regional, and local authorities. Now, in the interest of time, I will stop here, and as previous speakers have already highlighted, please reach out to us, even if you have rather preliminary ideas for a TSI request. Thank you very much.
So if Giuseppe is here, perhaps he could take the floor on this one.
Yeah, Giuseppe is there. Just isn't. Yeah, if he's able to speak.
Now? Okay, I'm sorry, I had an issue with the mic. So thank you very much. I'm Giuseppe Sciascia from the Unit B5, which is the unit responsible for financial sector and access to finance. I will continue along the green line, basically to introduce the flagship for the financial sector that we present this year. Just to briefly recall, the Central Bank of Ireland, which is actually one of the potential addressees of this flagship, has issued in November a statement that actually falls under the scope of this flagship. And these are supervisory expectations to address to financial institutions concerning the certain governance and regulatory requirements with respect to the monitoring of ESG risks. And indeed, the objective of this flagship is exactly this one. So to basically strengthen the capacity of financial sector supervisory authorities to monitor and address the risks related to ESG that emerge in the financial sector. Now, this is really a moving target. The regulatory environment in the EU is changing, but this year we believe that it was time to really take action and to start helping financial supervisory authorities to strengthen the work in this area and develop capacity to supervise the evolution of ESG risk in the financial sector. So we propose under this flagship three different types of potential activities, three different building blocks. One is related to the analysis of the legal and operational context. So basically to help authorities to map the regulatory requirements that concern the monitoring of ESG risks, covering all the different segments of the financial sector and all the potential types of risks, so macro, micro, but also with regard to the impact on consumers and investors. The second building block is represented by the development of data capacity and methodologies, so to support authorities in the establishment of a risk-based supervisory approach to monitor ESG risks and to map the kind of data that are needed and that are available in order to support the supervision of this kind of risk and develop associated tools. And finally, we have conceived a building block that will cover awareness and capacity building actions. So to raise awareness within the financial sector, the industry, but also among the public at large on the on considerations about ESG risks. So it is, I will not spend much time to explain how relevant, of course, this kind of project might be, both in terms of connection with the objectives of the RRF regulation, but more in general, with regard to the work that all the supervisory authorities at the European level in the financial sector are carrying on, all the work that they are carrying on ESG risks. Again, do not hesitate to contact us in case you have ideas that might fall under the scope of this flagship, and we will be more than happy to discuss this more in detail and to really have a bespoke approach to the needs of that you might express. Back to you, Alastair, and sorry again for the issue with the mic.
Grace. So if there's a colleague from B4 who can join to speak to us about, is it Francesca? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francesca, and I'm a member of the B4 team, which deals with health, labor market, and education. So as you can see in the slide, the flagship that we propose would be on integrating care. So with this flagship, what we aim to do is helping member states to design and implement structural reforms to reach indeed integrated care systems and move on with the pilots that we are aware are already existing in many member states, also through the supports of the European Commission, from as we seen, from very small pilot projects to systems that are indeed integrated. When we speak about integrated care, we mean a system where all the providers can act and communicate in a coordinated manner at every stage of life of the patients or of the person. When we speak about providers, we really mean all those people and specialists that take care of the person. So we speak about health specialists, nurses, social workers, GPs, but also informal carers, as we know, are a considerable part of the social and healthcare system. So the purpose of this flagship is, on the one hand, to break the current fragmentation that poses problems, particularly to those people who require simultaneous support of various professionals, as in the case of patients who suffer from multiple conditions, but also elderly, disabled people, and people with long-term care needs, which require physical assistance, but also different type of support from the health standpoint as well as from the social one. On the other hand, we also would like to enable the provision of care services in a complementary and continuous manner by bridging the traditional division both at the level of settings, so by creating a bridge between hospitals and family doctors, but also between the different type of care, physical, mental health, support for the daily activities. By breaking the current fragmentation between the different level of care, we would like to increase the capacity of the system to provide continuous care, reduce the duplication of efforts and the inefficiencies that today prevent people to access timely the care they need, and also facilitate the so-called community-based intervention, so independent living and the institutionalization of care. So shifting from the care that are provided in large-scale institutions towards more community and family-oriented care. To do that, we can provide different type of support. We can help you with high-level strategies as well as operational plans. So to understand which are the perhaps new roles that need to be created, the processes as well as the working practices. We can act more at operational level by preparing and implementing integrated care reforms at national, regional level. We can help you in understanding which are the barriers that today prevent these integrations, barrier that can, be of different nature, legislative, regulatory, administrative, financial, and also increase the ability to understand, for example, which funding elements should be in place for having this type of integration. As my colleague said, don't hesitate to reach out in case you would like to discuss your idea, even if they are at the very early stage. We'd be very happy to support you and go deeper in that. Thank you very much.
Is Sebastian here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Yes. Your country is already familiar with the European technical support in the various fields we have mentioned: education, health, and social protection. We had indeed 6 previous or ongoing projects where we have supported Ireland with topics such as, on top of Breda's one on health and social care workforce planning, and on top of the one presented by Francesca, we also helped you with higher education sustainability, health performance, or the Irish workplace retirement savings scheme. So I've seen all these departments present today, and they will be interested by the next flagship, because this year is the European Year of Youth. Youth is a particular concern, obviously, in Europe after the sacrifices made by the youngest generations for the elders. And this is why we are proposing this year to you a flagship named Youth First. So first goes for F for feet, I for instructed, R for respected, S for strong, socially strong, and T for thriving. So the purpose is to enhance your ability to implement reforms in these areas, like quality and inclusive education. We are thinking from early childhood education and care up to the European University Strategy. I've seen the Department of Further and Higher Education present among participants. For instance, gender balance in the choice of studies. But that can also be to develop green or digital skills, as referred several times by previous speakers. That can be to develop basic skills, reduce early school leaving, support the teaching profession, ensure the cost effectiveness of investment in education and training. So we also refer to combat fake news and discrimination, but we are also thinking positively to support volunteering, civic engagement of the young people, solidarity among them. So F, I said, goes in first for fit. So obviously we think about sports and food, nutrition, but also about digital well-being or psycho-socio support after the COVID crisis, particularly. And the objective of this flagship can also be to strengthen Ireland's capacity to provide social aid to young people, affordable housing. I've seen the housing agency among participants, and I know it's a particular concern in Ireland given the real estate situation. Lastly, as you see on the slide, the last objective is about financial literacy. And here we are thinking of topics such as e-money, online investment in the context of the cryptocurrency crash. I think we have all in mind what it might mean, but also more classic traditional loans. And another element or component of this objective might be also how to make the career of young searchers more attractive for their working conditions. And so the good news here is that you don't have to tick all the boxes of these extra long menus. You can select one or a combination of several components, and will help you. You need before, as mentioned by Francesca previously, our team is here for you to help you in preparing your application as presented by Alistair. And so my closing advice is for this particular flagship would be to you to select carefully your target population among the young people. Are we talking of the vulnerable ones? Are we talking of the young researchers? You see, so to target, to narrow it down, to target your population, and in contrast to widen maybe your consideration upon a possible line of actions, because we can help you from designing policy, enabling factors, governance framework, up to the evaluation of policy, measuring their impact, and so on. So hopefully one or several departments will have been interested to hear about this flagship. Back to you, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Sebastian. Over to Mina if she's online.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to present this flagship. Well, this one is actually a mix between European priorities and national interest. It's to a big extent provoked by the attempt of many member states to develop a scheme of mobility of civil servants across the European countries. And with the flagship that we're proposing this time, we will try to pilot this idea to see indeed how such exchange could be offered. The idea is indeed to help member states build partnerships to have better administrative cooperation, cross-border connections, to promote one-to-one dialogue, and most of all, exchange of practices and experience. Very specifically and concretely, the exchange practice will take place, will consist of several visits, 2 to 3 times of 3 weeks. So in total, the exchange could be up to 3 months, with one break within each visit. And the offer is to have this exchange in the span of 1 year after the start of the program. In the flagship, you can offer or you can request actually different kinds of exchanges. You will see in the template that there are specific areas that we have highlighted, and this is where we have highlighted actually the European priorities, the areas in which we think that such exchanges will have the bigger impact and will help indeed promote European policies and advance with European objectives. Now, we advise that actually you combine the interest for such exchanges in one request, because this will simplify a lot the selection process. You don't need to prioritize. So if you combine interests of different organizations, you do not need to prioritize them within the template. under the specific request, but what we would ask you to put and what we will be looking for is an explanation of the priorities. So why is this exchange requested? What are the specific initiatives, organizational, national policies or reforms that you're looking for? What exactly do you want to learn? And how it is going to help you actually with the implementation of your national initiatives. Also in the template, you can identify possible host organizations if you have that in mind. If not, we will be taking care of that. And we would also ask you in the template to put specific contact points for each organizations that are that have an interest, which will facilitate also the selection and then the implementation of the specific flagship project. I think these are the main very technical things that I wanted to say, because I know that the time is short, and usually there are a lot of questions about how exactly the exchange will take place. I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have after that. Thank you.
About public procurement as well, or is there another colleague?
Sorry, Alistair, you just want to repeat yourself there. I think you were just mute for half it. Go ahead. No,
sorry,
fine, no problem.
Mina, will you speak also about public procurement?
I'm not specifically prepared for that one, but I can say a little bit about the idea if there is no one else available. So the intention of this one is, again, to strengthen professionalism in the area of public administration. You're probably aware that the Commission has been helping member states to develop a competency framework for the different jobs that are involved or related to the handling of public procurement in the public sector. And the idea of this flagship is indeed to help member states identify how such competency frameworks can be developed within the national context, what kind of models they want to apply, how this is going to be integrated into the national training program, if there is a need for any type of certification, career development, and so on.
And thank you very much, Mina. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Could you say just could you say just a couple of words on this on the digital transformation flagship as well?
Yes, I can. Yeah, no problem. Well, this one is also an interesting idea this time, because there are, I mean, the digitalization of public administration is a big priority everywhere. At the same time, there is a lot of activity happening at central level, but what we see is that regional and local administrations very often are lacking the capacity to deal with the digitalization. And at the same time, they're the ones that are strongly involved in the delivery of public services. They're also managing a big part of public registers. Sometimes the use of data that is necessary for the delivery of different services or for offering data for businesses also at the level of cities or regions. So their capacity to be able to take part in the digital transformation is extremely important. And this is why we have developed this flagship, where the interest is within the national plans and priorities for digitalization, to allow regional and local administrations to advance with the different projects that are linked to building capabilities, also to develop their specific competences and skills, to see what kind of HR policies would be necessary to test different concepts and to prepare the ideas for different IT models that they can apply within their organizations, also to advance with different ideas in the area of digital. This is very much linked to the implementation of EIDAS as well, the regulation and the different modules or well tools, solutions that the Commission is also promoting in the context of the digital preparation for the digital decade. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mina. And can I pass the floor now to Jenya for the last of the flagships?
Почнах да се срещам с мъже, резултатите започнаха да идват. Това, което че трябва да...
I don't know. Is Jenya? Are you?
She's muted, I think, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Perhaps I mean I could just quickly go through this just in the interest of time, so we can move on to questions and answers from colleagues, because I know that you'll have a number, and I see them in the chat as well. But unless Jenya is, but I mean the purpose really of this flagship is just to increase the quality of information shared between tax authorities. So it is to do that in the context of DAC and to improve and increase the flow of information between tax authorities. On the other end, what this flagship aims to do is to enhance. I see Jenya is now. But I'll just finish this bullet, and I can pass to Jenya for any to complement. But the purpose here would then be to enhance monitoring and evaluation techniques as well. But I'll pass over to her.
Thank you very much, Alistair. It was a bit of took me some time because of the connection issues. Indeed, what you said is very relevant. This flagship is aimed to enhance the capacity of the tax administrations to exchange information. It has two components. The first one is focused mostly on the quality of the data, and the second is focused on cooperation. It follows very much on export missions that DigiTaxud is organizing on the last DAC directive. So we are supporting member states and in the implementation of the project and the recommendation of the expert groups in predominantly multi-country environment. And we would very much like to engage in further discussions with Ireland to join this project, should an interest be on that.
Jenya. So those are the last of the flagships. I'll maybe just say two words just on multi-country. Oh no, there's also do not significant harm. Sorry, I was jumping ahead. So I don't know. Could I pass the floor back to you, Jenya, then for that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This project is very much focused on the public finance perspective, and we work with the ministries of finance across the member states. This flagship, in a nutshell, is it's environmentally oriented, as you know, and it very much supports public administrations to square their investment priorities and investment programs in line with the principle and environmental objectives. In this respect, I would like to mention that our team, which is the Revenue Administration and Public Financial Management, has another flagship, which is an environmental taxation as such, and it has a substantive part, behavioral insights part, and economics part. We have two main priorities, which are digitalization and data-driven organizations, and also the second one is the Green Deal priorities, and they have very broad scope, and we would like to promote these flagships and to raise awareness across the member states.
Thank you very much indeed. So those are the 12 flagship initiatives, and as we've been saying throughout, it's by no means compulsory to opt for a flagship style request. The sort of standard request that you populate entirely yourself, in line with the policy needs and priorities of the member state, of course, possible. So if I just speak about another possibility that's open to you, and this is the multi-country or multi-regional project. So in many respects, I mean, this is self-explanatory, but it allows beneficiaries from a number of member states to benefit from technical support in the same area, looking at the same kind of priorities. So there has to be some kind of thematic overlap, but it can be from different member states, and the project can be at a regional or a national level. So you can have multi-regional projects in that sense as well. And so a cross-border element can be sort of thought of in that context. I mean, there are really two different kinds of multi-country requests. You can have coordinated submission of the same or similar requests by different member states. So this could be so that you would then try to speak to each other in advance of this, well, after the 5th of September, when interest in a multi-country project has been signaled, and you would try to develop a similar coordinated request in time for October and joint submission. And we have a couple of examples of that. We've got a microdata platform which involved a number of member states, and a hub for sustainable development. So there are those kind of joint or coordinated requests. Then you kind of have proxy, or if you like, surrogate requests, where one member state submits on behalf of other member states. So only one member state would do the submission, but it would be jointly prepared by the different member states. And we have a couple of examples of that there. I think just to sort of say what the added value of this is, of course, it just allows you to share practices in a way that can be very valuable. I mean, as Breda was saying before, you know, in many cases we're not I mean, we're probably not ever literally talking about reinventing the wheel, but we're all facing the same challenges, and in that context, it's good to share experiences and share practices, and these multi-country projects really facilitate that. So just to kind of bring this part of proceedings to a close, I mean, we've seen the 12 flagships. They're in a huge range of different areas. I hope you recognize them as responding to really essential policy needs that you yourselves are confronting on a daily basis, and you'll see something that catches your eye and inspires you for this TSI round. The multi-country project is another thing to consider. You don't need to make use of flagships there. You could, but you could invent something from scratch, looking at an essential policy need with another member state. But maybe just to underline, just to close, the multi-country and flagships are not obligatory. You can also just do a classic request that's neither a flagship nor a multi-country. So these are just options there. There's no obligation at all. But I hope that they have given you some sources of inspiration for this TSI round. So if I pass the floor, back to Fiona, sorry. Thanks.
Great. Thanks a million, Alistair, and thanks to everybody, to Mina, who I think ended up with more slides than she had anticipated to cover off. Guys, I'm very conscious time-wise. I know we have some questions in the box. So what we might do, Eilish has agreed that she will just have a look at the questions and that. If people want to stay on, we can answer as many questions as we can. If people need to leave, we will come back to you if there's a general kind of answer. We're going to go back out to you with the slides today. So as we move on to questions and answers, the only thing for those of you that have to leave, please engage with Eilish and myself as early as possible, and we'll engage with DG Reform. That's the one message I want you to take. I know already you've been told the 11th of October, so just keep that in your head as well, and we will be in touch with the slides and that from today. So I'm going to hand you over to Eilish, if she still has a voice at this stage, just to kind of coordinate on the questions. Thanks a million, guys.
Thanks, excuse me, thanks Fiona. So yeah, myself and Alistair might just run through these questions. And again, if you do have a question, pop it into the Q&A box there and we'll get through as many as we can. The first one is, can organisations under the aegis of a government department apply for TSI funding on their own, or does the department need to apply on their behalf? So the quick and easy answer is yes, you can apply as a body under the aegis. You don't have to go through your department. However, this year we have tried to, we've requested a nominated point of contact in each department solely for the purposes of that the point of contact can make sure that bodies under the aegis are aware of the TSI and the opportunities that are there. So by all means, you could apply yourself. And then are there particular new national level policies we should be aligning our proposals with this year? So as Alistair went through earlier, there's the Recovery and Resilience Plan. So there's an Irish one, Irish ORP. If you Google it on gov.ie, you'll find it there. Other strategies maybe include like the National Digital Strategy, the Climate Action Plan. Another question I have is it possible to view completed successful application forms online? Alistair, I see your head shaking there.
No, we wouldn't. I don't think we wouldn't share from our side sample applications from previous years. But we can provide. What we can do is we can provide expertise. I mean, we can provide you advice about how to tailor it. I mean, drawing on that advice, but just in the interests of the sort of integrity of the process and confidentiality, we don't share previous requests. But I mean, on your side, you will, I mean, deeper than yourselves as well, will have an idea of what the successful applications look like as well. But we can certainly help drawing on that previous experience, but not share the successful ones per se.
And Alistair, when I saw that come in, that question come in, I had a quick look. We did have a guide to fill out the application forms last year. The TSI, DG Reform have prepared, so I might just dig that out and see if there's a newer version of that available. It might just give some pointers for people filling out an application form. So we can send that out when we're sending out the link to this recording. Another question, Alistair, I might send it on to you, is exactly how important are synergies with the ORPs? Implementation of investment reform measures under Ireland's ORP is generally very targeted. Is identification of obvious compatibility with its broad themes, example, retrofit, wastewater treatment, business digitization, digital divide, work placement experience, as opposed to anything more directly interconnected to the ORP process itself?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on that, I mean, I would say I'm very conscious in the Irish context that the NRRP milestones and targets are indeed very, very targeted, if that's not tautological, but yeah, no, indeed, it's a very, in comparative terms, it's a small NRRP. I mean, in relative terms, if you compare it with the Italian one, for example, which is many hundreds of times larger. So it doesn't, you wouldn't expect it, and I think I'm right in saying that it doesn't exhaust the agenda for policy reform in Ireland by any means, whereas it might occupy a lot of more space in other member states. So I think we wouldn't, in the Irish case, I mean, it wouldn't be a prerequisite to be meeting directly in NRRP. If there are synergies If they're indirect links, that's very good. If there are direct links, all the better. But that's not something we would look for, I think, as a prerequisite in the Irish case. For country-specific recommendations, I mean, they're sort of formulated, I think, in slightly more open textured way. So I think there you could sort of work to connect what you're doing with the country-specific recommendations, but I mean, there are others, EU level strategies, national level strategies, which are also a good kind of substantiation of the impact that the policy problem has and its breadth in terms of geographical and policy area impact. So there are other ways to kind of do that, but I do take the point that the NRRP isn't the obvious place to look for every policy area in Ireland. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Another question I have is most EU programmes emphasise bottom-up approaches without a formal national oversight gatekeeper role or applications in the member state's name. From a local authority perspective, how does a demand-driven TSI operate in practice?
So, I mean, I would say, I think if we talk about, there's no, I think I'm right in saying that DEEPR doesn't really act as a gatekeeper in the case of the TSI.
Yeah, we will be just the kind of point of contact to the coordinating authority. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think in that sense, yeah, I mean, we're very much sort of counterparts. So we're trying to work together to coordinate requests fundamentally from the government departments in Ireland and from other eligible bodies. So in that sense, we are demand driven. There's no filter at a deeper level or on my level either. So in that sense, it maintains that kind of demand driven quality, I think.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question, yeah.
Is there any other questions? I don't think there is. No, Fiona, do you want to add anything to that answer?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and thanks for that, Alistair, as well. And I think the other thing just to bear in mind if you're putting an application in is when you talk about the depth and the breadth of the problem and what support is there, if there is other departments or agencies or whatever that need to be involved or should be involved from the outset in terms of being in a position that your project is, that you can replicate it or that it's transferable perhaps across other countries or whatever, it's important that you would do that engagement at the outset. You know what I mean? So that you have your other interested parties kind of working together with you in terms of that. As Breda pointed out earlier, and we had a discussion around it, one of the biggest things if you're successful in this is in terms of drawing up what the expectations are when the contract is going out in terms of for the provision of services, because it's very important to be clear from the beginning what the outputs are. And if it is a case of it's a project or it's gathering kind of research or whatever it is, one part of that to think about is the question about how do you actually, when that piece is done, how do you expand it? How do you make sure it's transferable? How is it scalable, perhaps to other, be it local authorities, be it other departments or whatever, is really, really important. So that's all I'd kind of say on that one. But if there's more questions that come in or you're not satisfied with the answers, guys, that are there, please feel free to email us and we will come back to you in terms of that. So I suppose at this stage, to thank Ailish, Alistair, Natalie, Marianne, Breda, and all our friends from DG Reform, I would expect that we will have a lot of interest in this. So please do get in touch. If we can't answer the questions for you, we will do our utmost to get the responses from our colleagues over in DG Reform.
Fiona, can I just jump in with one question, sorry, which is kind of, I suppose, a very interesting one, maybe that other people might like to know. How do we go about finding other countries that have similar policy needs? You know, they're saying they wouldn't necessarily know where to start. So Alistair, would you like to enlighten?
Yeah, I mean, well, for that, I think it's really on a case-by-case basis. But I mean, by now we have quite a kind of a Rolodex, of different contacts in different ministries, and we can put you in touch with people. I suppose many of you will have contacts that are sitting in things like council working parties and things like that. So you might have other ways of engaging with EU counterparts. So that would be another way. But I mean, that's something we can kind of help you join the dots on that. I don't think we wouldn't expect you necessarily to go out and sort of trawl the websites of your counterparts looking for somebody. And we can, yeah, that's something we can certainly help you with. And yeah, and I mean, the best thing is that if we spontaneously get applications on similar topics, and it's not totally by accident that would happen, because, you know, as we were saying before, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're all facing similar policy problems. So I think there's a good chance of there being a spontaneous application on a similar topic from at least one of the other 27. So, but I mean, if I can speak to last year's experience, when we were approached by Irish authorities on this question, there were at least 2 other authorities that were cooking up something similar. So it was good, at least and I was able to get those counterparts into a call with each other and to start drafting. So I think it's helpful in that sense.
Thanks, Alistair, and sorry for interrupting you, Fiona.
Not at all, Irish. So I suppose just to recap on the dates, if you have an interest in the multi-country applications, 2nd of September at the latest. But look, if you have an idea that you think could be multi-country, come into myself and Irish on that, and we'll see what we can do, and we can feed it back to the reform. If you could let us know by the 23rd of September at the latest, if you are really serious about putting in an application. But as I said earlier, let us know as soon as possible, even if you're just having thoughts about what might be an application at this stage, and we'll be happy to do as much as we can for you on that. So thanks again to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. All I can say is it's a bit cloudy looking here, but it's not too cold yet. Thank you all for your participation, and thank you to all the support that we get. So on that note, I will say goodbye. Thank you.